our stew is all nice and ready. Let's start with the ingredient list. You have some red bell pepper, celery, onion, leeks, Roma tomatoes, because these do not have as much liquid in them as the other short fat ones, the ones that are good for, what do you call them, for salads. I don't like those because they produce a lot of water. So just some Roma tomatoes, fresh basil, Italian parsley. This is frozen ginger and frozen garlic. That's why the garlic looks like that. I just freeze them because they last a little longer. A habanero. I'm gonna add some more because I like it a little spicy. Over here we have some shredded green beans. You could just get it from any grocery store. Some bouillon powder, some green black pepper rather. Now we're gonna zoom into the African spices. So this is called Negro pepper. You can find this on Etsy or Amazon. It is very potent. It has a kick to it, but it tastes so good. It makes everything taste really, really nice. We have something called Bebe. This is very, very strong. That's why I only have one of it. Sometimes I only use half. I think if you're just dabbling into African peppers and you're not used to them or African spices, I think you should start small and then build your way up depending on how much of it you like or do not like it. I would not suggest using a lot of it for your first time cooking. I think, again, try a little bit, and if you like it, then you can add more of it. Here's some white pepper and obviously some vegetable oil, and that'll be it for our main ingredients that will go into our dish. So the fish we're using today is fresh sea bass. I got this from my local Asian store that has a fresh section. You can find this at yours too. You can use fresh sea bass or red snapper or any fish of that type of your choosing. So I have marinated this with some very simple ingredients: some black pepper, bouillon powder, and some sea salt. We're marinating this first so that it can sit and, you know, take in all the marinade before we, you know, while we're cooking our other dishes. Again, this is like properly clean, and I put the slits in them so that the marinade can get into it nicely. I'm going to transfer this into a colander so it could drain out the water while I get ready. Do you remember that little spice that I showed you? That I only used one of it? So you're supposed to crack it open before putting it in the blender. When you crack it open, it would look something like this. And then you take the seed out and then blend. So we're going to blend our tomatoes, garlic, ginger, and the African spices. I'll put this at the bottom, and then we're going to blend the rest. So we'll add a tad bit of water to this, very little, because I want it to be a dense stew. So that's actually way water I have in there. This blender can blend without any water, but for those of you who have blenders that need water, you want to put the bare minimum water that's needed to blend the whole thing. And I will blend it on just on high. We will add our celery to the mix. We'll add our celery to the mix. Again, cooking with one hand is so not fun. But there we go. I'm going to get it off camera and continue stir. Once it starts to look like that, now I'm going to remove it and put it in that bowl. Again, this is just my way of doing this. A lot of things that I make, I like to make them my way. So we're going to take this out and put it in the bowl. We're going to keep that aside. Okay, you don't have to worry about getting every tiny piece out because you're cooking in the same pot anyways. I'm going to put the pepper back in because I want the pepper to keep cooking. That takes a while to cook, so it could really dissolve once I'm ready to consume it. Because this gets quite messy, as you can see the splatters all over the place, I will partially cover it just to let it vent. And you want to stir this occasionally because it will burn at the bottom. Now, a quick little tip: you want to use a pot that has better heat control, because if you use a very light pot, this sauce will burn at the bottom meanwhile the top is not cooking. So since this is gonna take a little while, I decided to leave the yam for this time so that way, you know, I can make better use of my time. This is called, we call it Calaba Yam. I'm gonna see if there's anywhere online where you could buy this. You could find this at your local African market. I was lucky enough to find this at my local Asian market. I live in Phoenix, and just for those of you who live in Phoenix, Arizona, or anywhere in that area, you can find this at Lily's. Yeah, it's a yam. You can either do this with potatoes, plantains. It's a sauce, so you can cook it however you want, with some rice. Again, that's your choice. So this is how we prepare this yam. And the reason I explain this is because I also know that there are non-African people that follow me on Instagram that always ask me about, like, I read local recipes and stuff. So I'm going to show them how to prepare the yam. Just going to cut them into a few pieces like so. And now the way you clean this is, I'm going to look for a smaller knife. This is just basically like a paring knife. Okay, we're going to use a knife like this because it really helps you get in there. So let me see if I can show this on camera properly. I'm using my phone to film, so excuse me. My tripod is not working, so I can't use my camera. So with this, if you can see, there is a very, very thin layer of skin. You want to remove the thin layer of skin. So there are two layers of skin. You have this layer, that brown layer, and then you have this layer. Let me peel it so you can see what I'm talking about. You see that? That's the top layer, and then the second layer. You want to make sure that when you clean this, you take off that second layer. It's not very thick, and you're just going to go in motions like so. Watch out, do not hurt yourself. Don't cut your hands or your fingers. Kids, please don't try this at home without the supervision of your parents or an adult. This is YouTube, so I have to make that disclaimer. So you can do this. You just want to peel it like this. This knife is very sharp, so I'm being very careful not to hurt myself. So that's how you peel that. Or another way you could do this is just put it down and take it straight down if you're not used to doing it in your hand like I did. It's weird for me to do it this way because I grew up doing it in my hand per se. So this is another really easy way to clean it. Okay, you don't want to cut too deep in because then you're just wasting food. Like so. So when you're done, if you have any blemishes like this, just take your knife and go back and clean that up. So this is a well peeled Calaba yam. We're going to peel the other pieces and then boil them. Okay. So I have rinsed it and thrown out the water like twice already. So what I want to do is to really ensure that there's no sand left in there. Just going to wiggle it in the water, make sure there's nothing on there, and then put it in the pot and do the same, because sometimes if you just carry it all out and transfer it to the pot, you will still end up with some sand on it or pieces of skin. So So these have been cleaned. We are just going to cut them in the middle, like so. Pretty easy stuff. I want to cut them into equal pieces. Sometimes people like cutting them round like this, or you can cut them like this. I'm just showing you however you choose to do it. That's your choice. There we go. Okay, now the thing is, I don't like them too thin, so sometimes if I feel like cutting it this way is going to make it too thin, I'll cut it like this, because I want it to have about that much thickness to it, so it's not just, you know, yeah. So now we're going to wash this in a bowl. We're going to wash them nicely. This has a lot of sand in it, so you want to make sure you wash it thoroughly. because there's sand coming from the skin. You don't want any sand or debris in there. That's just nasty. It will ruin your teeth when you take a bite at it. So we want to wash this nicely, and I'll be right back. So this is rinsed and in the pot and on the fire. We are just going to add some salt to it, just a little bit of salt, and a cup of water. Now, some people might wonder, for those of you who've never had yams, what they taste like. These are very starchy root vegetables, so they're sort of like potatoes, but they have a little more texture to them. Not texture, they're a little firmer. They're more firmer than potatoes, but again, they do not taste like potatoes. They're just like, you know, like a nice starchy root vegetable, if you were wondering. So we're going to put a cup of water in here, put the heat on medium high, and cover it and let it cook. We're going to go back and check up on our stew and make sure it's not burning, and we will just stir this nicely. So as I said, this is going to reduce down to a very thick sauce. It's looking good. So once your sauce is cooked down and it's of this consistency, then you know your tomatoes are fully cooked, and it won't have any of that tangy sour tomato taste. Now we're going to add what we had made earlier back into the mix. There we go. We're going to stir. Now this got a little too thick, but that's okay, because I'm just going to add a tad bit of water, you know. So we will go ahead and add some more vegetable oil in there. It's good. And this is the time when we're going to add a bouillon and salt. So at this time, we are going to add about half a teaspoon of bouillon powder. I'm using the beef flavor. That's my favorite flavor. Some black pepper. This is in the grinder, so I have to do this off camera. And then some salt to taste. You just want to be careful because bouillon is salty. You don't want to overdo it with the salt. We're going to add that, and I have to do all of that off camera, unfortunately, because I'm holding my camera. I actually did that already. We're going to nicely mix this and taste it and make sure it tastes as good as we would like it to taste. Remember how I told you this makes quite a mess? Look at my stove. There's like splatter everywhere from there. So you want to be careful not to burn yourself. Our stew is all nice and ready. So the yam has been boiling for approximately 10 to 11 minutes now. You want to periodically check it and make sure the water is enough and it's not burning at the bottom. It is time to fry fish. So I had some oil on the fire, just some vegetable oil. I added some onion shells to it to give the oil a little more flavor. I'm not going to take the shells out. I want the shells actually kind of burn in there. It just adds an extra layer of flavor. And we are going to drop our, you remember our marinated fish? We're just going to drop that in there. You want to be very careful. Stand back a little bit because the splatters could burn you. Yep, I'm running away. I don't want to get fried. Yeah. So we are going to let the fish cook for a while. We don't want it crispy. We just want it fried just enough, like a medium fry. But if you want it crispy, that's your prerogative. But personally, I don't like it overly dry because you don't really get to enjoy the sauce with it. The fish is split, 6 minutes on each side, that's enough. That should be enough depending on the sizes of your fish. So a yam is ready and it's been cooking for approximately 25 minutes. The water is like almost done getting dry. And the way I test it out is to see if, without having to taste it, make sure the color is uniform from, the vapor would not let me be great. If the color is uniform on every side of the yam once you break into it, then it is fully cooked. If the center looks a little a different color or different texture than the outside, then it's not fully cooked. That's usually a really good way to check. But again, this has been cooking for 25 minutes and the yam is done cooking. So we are all done cooking, and voila, it looks really good, smells really, really good. Just be aware that if you have little kids in the house, these have some bones in them. You know, you want to take out the bones before serving it to them, but it tastes so yummy. And let me know down below if you did try this recipe, how they turned out. Please subscribe to my channel and show some support and some love. And if there are any recipes you'd like to see me make, just let me know. I do cook things from all over the world, basically. So yeah, thank you guys for stopping by. Ciao. Love you.
Premiumbeat.com